What's up, everybody? I just came across this quote from David Lynch today, actually. I just wanted to read it regarding creativity and what he calls the art life. He says, "The idea just needs to be just enough to get you started, because for me, whatever follows is a process of action and reaction. It's always a process of building and then destroying, and then out of this destruction, discovering a thing and building on it. Nature plays a huge part in it. Putting different materials together, like baking something in sunlight or using one material that fights another material, causes its own organic reaction. Then it's a matter of sitting back and studying it and studying it and studying it, and suddenly you find you're leaping up out of your chair and going in and doing the next thing. But if you know you've got to be somewhere in a half hour, there's no way you can achieve that. So the art life means a freedom to have the time for the good things to happen." So in my last vlog, I did a big thing on structure, keeping to a particular group of things to work on. This time around, I wanted to show the opposite, which is doing what comes to you, going with your instinct, going with your gut. This way of doing things can, at least for me, seem very intimidating. There's a sense of insecurity that's present during the course of doing it this way. A lot of this stuff you can find coming into play when you practice soloing, when you practice self-expression, and you'll see a few different examples throughout this video of me playing through a few different things. I've been practicing on piano, which I'll mention again is not my first instrument. It's something that I've just over the last few years given more dedicated study than I ever did before. The reason why I pick soloing to talk about here is it's because it's supposed to be self-expression in its purest form. And when I say soloing, I should mention that I'm talking about improvisation in the jazz sense of the word, and meaning coming up with stuff on the spot. So my thoughts upon going and practicing some of that kind of stuff just now was one that was actually really hopeful. It felt like I was improving at being able to get out whatever I heard and be able to play it. Now, part of that is technical facility being gained through such things indirectly as doing the conservatory stuff that I talked about in the last vlog. Also, just repeated exposure to the instrument. And in that way, I'd relate this to language. I've spent a fair amount of time, and I love sitting down with language apps, and I've read books in other languages with Google Translate close by, just as a way to flex the knowledge muscles, and it's a mental exercise I enjoy. What anybody who studied this stuff will tell you, though, it's if you don't use it, you lose it, and it's true, as with any skill. But I look at it with musical vocabulary. It's a similar thing with your use of it. You've got to put it into regular practice in order for it to become part of your fabric. Speaking English is kind of one of the best things the things I'm most good at, because I do it every day, and I keep myself limber that way. In a way, I'm almost jealous of the English that I use getting as much attention as it does versus my musical fluency, which, who knows, might be around like a first grade level. In the same way that what I'm expressing is dependent upon the vocabulary that I possess, what I want to impart to you. I want you to understand, glimpse a certain part of my consciousness. Hopefully that's not too out there, but in order for me to get you to experience something of what I'm experiencing, I need to use my vocabulary effectively, and music is much the same way. So improv is kind of a big test of that. What do you have what can you use to express yourself? Do you have a bunch of ideas? So the reason why I brought up the David Lynch quote is because he mentions, not in that quote actually, but just a little bit before it in the text, talking about when he was studying painting, needing 4 hours for 1 good hour worth of work, because you gotta wait for the idea to show up. If you're exploring anything through a creative lens, that creative element does not work on a clock. It doesn't clock in and clock out. It's not mindful of the time or an appointment you have. So ideally, when you're looking to do stuff that is creative and unstructured, you want to have a long period of time open to you, available to you, with whatever tools you need. Lynch mentions for painting, getting the canvas stretched out and ready to be painted upon, which can take time in advance. Have all that material ready so when inspiration strikes, you can just go at it. A personal with how I feel, it's like, give yourself 2 hours. I find that a couple hours is a good benchmark. I wouldn't say it's not worth doing before then, but at least a couple hours is a good way to ensure a certain standard. So soloing is never something that I felt particularly comfortable with. So increasing my fluency in that area. This also pertains to drums too, for example. Drums is actually a really good example of I just let myself go at the beginning and just let whatever comes. I might play a particular groove with the intent to work on that, but it's like almost without fail, within a certain period of time, I'm hearing other diversions or cross rhythms, and I looked at it in much a similar way as learning a language. How do you say this? And I do that a lot in my head too. Then there's the overall just definition of one's voice. You're not going to get that through an entirely regimented routine. What I would suggest is just sometimes if you're sitting down and you're working on something, and I'm sure this can work for things other than music too, doing as Mr. Lynch suggests and just having a solid block of time with no real expectations and only like a vague idea of what it is you want to do, and seeing what comes of that. Art is something that is ultimately it's a formless thing in and of itself. So acknowledging that from time to time and just like letting go of rationality, letting go of expectation, and letting go of framework, and just allowing yourself to fully immerse yourself in what you're doing, and embrace the randomness, the chaos of it. Having a link to that even when you're doing more structured practice. The more you reach down there, I think, just like any form of practice, the more you reach down into that formless kind of world, the more comfortable you're gonna feel. And then to tie it to my vocabulary analogy, the more you're going to feel fluent, it's going to feel a part of you, and you'll have more at your disposal in terms of vocabulary.